The next matter to come before the court this morning is State of Ohio versus Jentle Love. I know that we are just a couple minutes early. Is there any reason why we can't go forward with this oral argument?
No, not at all. No.
I was like to make sure. I don't know who we're expecting. Thank you. The court has read the briefs. The state has waived oral argument. We're ready to see when you are.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. May it please the court, my name is James Armstrong, and I represent Jentle Love. Like the argument you just had before you, much of this is the sufficient evidence and manifest weight argument. There's also an assignment of error for prosecutorial misconduct, Your Honor. This is a unique case. Actually, I know the court sometimes goes to high schools, and this would have been one of those cases I think maybe a high school class would have been interested in hearing. Jentle Love is a nurse, or at least she was, and she was living with her boyfriend, who was a police officer in Highland Hills. James Wallace got himself into trouble with the FBI and in federal court, and he had known Mr. Borway for many years, and he said, you know, I'm getting steroids from Mr. Borway. So the FBI put them in touch with the local law enforcement, and through James Wallace, they did controlled purchases involving James Borway. According to the record, they want to do these controlled purchases out in public, where they can have more control over the situation. And on two of these occasions, Mr. Borway happened to be with Ms. Love doing relatively innocent things. One was, I believe they were shopping at Target at Arlington Plaza, and I believe another time they were going to have dinner at the Golden Corral, which is where they set up these controlled purchases. The third purchase actually took place at their home in Mogador, which is actually in Portage County. It wasn't in Summit County, although, and it's an issue that was objected to on the issue of venue by trial counsel. It was overruled, but the house is clearly in Portage County. Mr. Borway, when he was arrested on this, pled guilty and said that Ms. Love knew nothing about that. The jury came back with a conviction of Ms. Love, which is very troubling for a number of reasons. One, you had the person who was mainly involved, who was a law enforcement officer, saying, I did it all, she really didn't know anything about this. The state claimed that, well, she took some of the money, but this was a friend of his for 20 years, and he said, yeah, I told him he owed me money. Now, they're boyfriend-girlfriend, not husband and wife. I mean, if somebody owes me $2,500, my wife's going to know about it before they actually deliver it, but being boyfriend and girlfriend, that's usually not the same type of relationship.
But counsel, that was opposite. He testified to that, but in his recorded statements with the police, I understand he said the opposite. Is that correct?
I know there was testimony to that effect. I'm troubled by that because he also testified in those recording statements that she didn't know anything about it. So
he said both things.
So he said both things. If the standard is still beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have the law enforcement, you start off with the troubling case of the fact is the state's argument works on the assumption that Ms. Love had no reason to believe or should have known that her law enforcement boyfriend was committing crimes. And what evidence is there that she knew he was committing crimes? There really isn't any. In fact, the proof that, there's actually more proof that she didn't do it. There's more evidence she didn't know than she did know, and that's evidenced by simply, if she was aware that he was selling antibiotic steroids, why was the steroids and the drugs they found in the house in Mogador hidden in a bedroom where the police testified they didn't photograph it where it was because they had to bring it down off a shelf in the corner? If she's aware of this and they share a house, he wouldn't need to hide it from her in the house.
Well, usually illegal substances, most people that are somewhat intelligent don't leave them just laying around all over the place either, in case other people come into the home. It
True.
would make sense that it would be secreted in some manner.
logical explanation, but there's also a logical explanation that he was hiding it from her too, because he didn't want her to find it.
Now, 2 times she was present with the drugs being sold. Okay.
Correct. Well, she was in the area.
Okay,
The one, I believe both of them occurred in, I think, Mr. Wallace's vehicle,
okay.
if I remember the record
I'm
correctly.
trying to remember too, but regardless, the evidence came in that she had received the money.
There is evidence that he said put it in her purse, and that's when he said, well, I told her that he owed me money.
Right, but that was the one occasion. About the second occasion, was it the same explanation?
I don't believe that both times the money was put in her purse.
I couldn't remember.
I think there was only one time, Your Honor. I read a lot of the record over again, but I don't, at this present moment, I'm
I just
having-
read it, I can't remember.
I feel better.
There's a line in your brief, I'm just wondering if this is it. Mr. Borway further testified that on July 8th, Borway and Love came to his home. It says Mr. Borway said that when he asked Mr. Wallace why he always brings Miss Love, you mean Mr. Wallace asked Mr. Borway why he always brings Miss Love with him?
Well, the problem that I had, I think that might be in my reply brief, because,
That's in your, actually, I think Apple's brief, and it states that Mr. Borway replied, everything is cool. So he brought her along because,
well, here's the problem I have with that. When did anything illegal take place in July, Your Honor?
this was in Mr. Wallace's apartment. Right?
There's no indictment for any wrongdoing in the month of July.
It wasn't for that, it was just the statement that he made apparently that he brought her along because she was cool. She knew what was going on, she was cool. That's the inference that you get from that, everything is cool.
Yeah. The FBI informant who was under federal indictment, that one? Okay. So, who had an interest in lying to people or saying things? But I found it interesting because the state, in their brief, they keep mentioning July, but there's no allegation of wrongdoing in July at all.
And I'm refreshing my recollection too. The state in the brief, and of course we'll read the record in great detail, but said that the first time that defendant Love, that the undercover agent or CI gave her the money, and that was on June 7th, and on June 17th, she also accepted the cash. That's what their allegation is. So 2 times out of the 3, she was present and accepted the cash. So I guess my point is people owe him a lot of money that she's taking the money for.
And if it were my wife, she'd know exactly why. If it were, not that I would ever be brave enough to ever, or stupid enough to have a girlfriend, she might not have.
I think the second one's stupid enough.
But then that goes, Your Honor, to the statement, did she have a reason to believe that her police officer boyfriend was committing a crime? I mean, we have we try to teach everybody to look up and tell police to believe the police. I mean, we have a lot of cases come before you that the sole conviction is based on testimony of the police. In this situation, you have a police officer who's actually saying, she really didn't have anything to do with this. Now, the state wants to argue that, well, that's just to protect her. But then that goes back to but she hid, he had hid the drugs in the house. Now, obviously, the court could come up with reasons why that wouldn't, but it also is a reason why she wouldn't know if she was that involved, that it was in the spare bedroom or some other place where she would be unlikely to come across it.
And do the possession charges stem from that box of things that were in the closet on high shelf or from other?
There's 2. One of them took place in Summit County, the other one did not take place in Summit County. Anything that took place, everything that has the August date on it would have been the house in Portage County, because that was the search warrant. They did a search warrant in the home in Portage County.
Well,
She wasn't even there then.
was it the state's position that it was a continuing course of conduct, the whole thing?
No, the state in their brief said that there was testimony that it was in Summit County. So the same officers that are testifying that she was involved are the same ones that testified that a house that's in Portage County was in Summit County. Because they said the state in their brief, because I double checked this yesterday, said all activity took place in Summit County.
Right,
And
well,
it didn't.
So, but as it relates to the possession charges only, as it relates to her, those are possession where? Only in that home, or when this transaction is, one of these transactions happening?
One of those transactions,
Okay.
the one, there was no indictment for June 7th. In June 17th, they indicted her for, if I remember the indictment correctly, that's what they indicted her for. The interesting part, Your Honor, is the controlled purchases, though, never involved her. They always talked to him. They always were talking to Mr. Borway. And when Mr. Wallace testified, that's who he called. He testified he never contacted Ms. Love ever. And this was a pretty weak case for the prosecutor, which is why I felt that the judge improperly let in evidence that she's a nurse, and that speculation by an officer regarding, in his experience, sometimes, somebody who works at a hospital or a healthcare facility will bring home small amounts of drugs. I don't want to read the whole thing for you.
Well,
right here.
that's kind of why I questioned what the possession charges were stemming from, because there's evidence in the brief that testimony from the officer was related to a prescription that had a patient's name on it that was found either on her person or in the house. So I'm trying to see if there's a separation between the anabolic steroids that her boyfriend is alleged to have been selling with or without her help, and another type of drug that came from the hospital that had someone's name on it.
Well, the drug was promethazine, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and it is an anti-nausea medicine. It is not a controlled purchase. It is not a controlled substance. And the state, in their brief, claims that, well, they had a right to go in and talk about her being a nurse because they found this non-controlled substance that apparently may have belonged to somebody else.
Which is illegal, by the way, isn't it?
Well, Your Honor,
You can't have somebody else's prescription in your possession. I mean, that's the whole point. It's not a controlled substance, but it is a prescribed drug.
but it wasn't one of the things that they charged her with. And they didn't charge her with theft. So you have apparently a possible crime. If I use, for sake of argument, your theory, you have a possible crime that they never charged her with, but they used that to try to get evidence against something in which they really have very weak evidence on. How would that have been allowed? Because it's clear on cross that he says that that you have, in the question, you have absolutely zero evidence that Jentle Love took any opiate, hydrocodone, oxymorphine, anything along those lines from that hospital, correct? The answer from the officer, that's correct, and she's not charged with theft. She's charged with possession. So why was the question even allowed? To insinuate that, well, this nurse must have been involved in it because, we found this anti-nausea medicine that she may or may not have taken. But that wasn't even one of the charges. I mean, if the state's allowed to essentially accuse somebody of crimes on the fly without any prior notice, then due process goes out the window. Because that doesn't give the defense a chance to go, well, wait a minute, and then bring in testimony regarding that. In fact, it was entirely irrelevant to whether or not she knew that Mr. Borway, the Highland Hills police officer, was illegally selling antibiotic steroids.
Let me ask a question. The incident that occurred on July 8th was grounds for what the indictment was for, correct?
If I remember the indictment, there is nothing that talks about a crime in July.
In July, okay.
There's 2 incidences in June and 1 on August 12th. If I remember, because I remember reading the transcript trying to go in July. Where are they getting July from?
Did every transaction between Mr. Wallace and Mr. Borway, were they all recorded because of Mr. Wallace's status as an informant?
I believe through.
Do you always have recordings on?
I believe 2 out of, I think all 3 were, one of which she wasn't even present. That was the one at the house in August. She wasn't even present for. And that's clearly in the record that she wasn't present for that.
You have about 30 seconds.
I have 3. Your Honor, this is between the facts that the officers testified this case happened, everything happened in Summit County when it didn't, the fact that the trial court allowed in evidence that was clearly prejudicial with absolutely no probative value of the underlying crimes that were indicted for, I ask this court to reverse this decision and either just plain reverse it or, at a minimum, send it back for a new trial so Ms. Love can fairly be adjudicated on what her actual actions were and her culpability or non-culpability